Are you sitting with thousands of hours of B-roll content and telling yourself, I'll start posting tomorrow? Are you in your head worried about your friends and family, thinking you're cringe for choosing to be visible? Are you chasing trends instead of building influence? Welcome to the Visibility Standard, where the visionaries of today are changing the rules of their industries and letting their voice be heard. I'm your host, Jasmine, and we are setting the standard. I am so excited for my guest today. She is known as Hey Sarah Therapy on Instagram. She shares her journey of rescuing a feral cat. She opened us up into her world of dating, experiencing heartbreak, grief, loss, transition. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Jasmine. I'm so happy to be here.
We talked a bit offline about just transitioning to social media as a full-time job, experiencing visibility, experiencing this huge nervous system shift when you do become
Mhm.
visible. People start referencing your platform and how therapy has been a huge support and being able to continue showing up online. Just to start us off, what has your journey been like on social media so far? So, why'd you get started and what has driven you to keep going?
Well, I'm an elder millennial. And so I remember when Facebook was new. I've always been slow to start with social media. Like all my friends had Facebook before I did. I've never been much of a social media person. And I guess around 2020, when COVID hit, I
Hmm.
started really noticing therapists on Instagram, and TikTok was starting to come onto the scene. And I felt this real desire to put myself out there to become a bit more of a public figure. My first career was in journalism,
Okay.
and I was a what you might call like a narrative nonfiction writer, meaning like I was writing investigative journalism pieces, or sometimes music too. I was a music writer, but I was always in the story, like I was writing it kind of memoir style, and that's always just been my creative impulse is to tell stories and to put myself in stories. So when 2020 hit, I started really wanting to try social media. I actually did try for a few months and I wasn't getting traction quick enough. And I
Mhm.
started to get perfectionistic about it and self-critical about it and embarrassed. Like I'm putting myself out there and I'm not getting
Yeah.
thousands of followers right away. And I just couldn't really take the heat of that feeling,
Mhm.
the cringe factor. So I stopped. And then I watched all these people do it. And I felt a lot of like jealousy and envy. And then I've been in therapy for forever, like really pretty much nonstop for decades. So I was in therapy that whole time, but I went through a relationship in 2022 and 2023, got engaged, that ended, and did a lot of deep healing work in that relationship and after that relationship. I was so heartbroken after we broke up
Mhm.
that I just had this surge of creative energy. It was like couldn't bear to be quiet because I was grieving so hard. And so I just started pouring that energy into creating social media. So did a whole rebrand of my page, charted what I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do then was different than what I ended up doing. I was uncomfortable in the beginning with, and I'd actually love to hear your thoughts on this, but I was uncomfortable in the beginning talking about myself too much in the first person. Like I was going to do it a little bit, but I was really going to try
Mhm.
to stay focused on like trauma and childhood trauma and talking to people about their struggles. But I found that to be quite difficult for reasons that I'd be interested in talking about too. I actually, there are some people who are really gifted at this, but I actually don't think it's easy or even necessarily organic or intuitive to try to create content on social media as a therapist that's about what other people are struggling with. I just don't think it really lands that well. I think it's really hard to speak directly to people's problems. I think there are some people who figured out how to do it. I could not figure out how to do it. I've decided personally that the best way to touch people and to mirror them and to validate them
Mhm.
is not to try to go, here's what childhood trauma looks like, or here's how you
Mhm.
might have childhood trauma, but rather, here's what I feel and for people to resonate with that kind of it's a different kind of mirroring through my own storytelling. So that's how it evolved, but it took some time for me to get comfortable with that and for me to be willing to risk it and to stop caring maybe what other therapists might think of me because I do reveal a lot about my personal life online. It took me some time. But as soon as I started doing that, my account just really exploded in stages and stuff. And I think there are still things I haven't really been brave enough to talk about online that I'm hoping I will eventually. But that's been my journey so far.
One, I love that you speak to the 2020 TikTok surge of therapists
Yeah.
because I don't think our profession thought we could ever see ourselves reflected in social media. Like, none of us imagined ourselves
No.
as, oh, cool, like TikTok, like therapists can also show up online as people. And
Hmm.
the pandemic said, actually, you can. And that
Hmm.
I think gave all of us so much permission and also has forced us to look at if we're going to show up online,
Hmm.
what does that mean? What does that look like? Is it too much to share about ourselves? Is it not enough? Who do we want to engage? How do we maintain the, I think, status within our own profession as viewed as like
Yes.
credible or
Yes.
professional? Like you, I've also struggled with talking so much in like the first person. I would say
Yes.
now I am feeling much more comfortable with doing that because I recognize there are aspects of my story that I do want to share. I want people to know me, and that is what resonates. And I feel like I can reach a broader audience in that way. I found myself getting burnout when I tried to offer psychoeducation all the time. So, like, to
Yes.
your point of, this is what childhood trauma looks like. This is how you can alleviate your anxiety. There are people that can do it so
Yeah.
well. I found myself exhausted and really hated creating at that point.
100% agree. It just did not feel natural to me. It felt, to me, it just felt empty or sort of hollow, like it really lacked a certain kind of real connection or real risk. I think that for me, that's the sweet spot is, am I taking creative risk? And am I, yeah, do I feel aligned in what I'm trying to talk about? And that did not start happening for me until I started talking about myself and being, I mean, it's interesting. I've heard some really popular Instagram therapists who advise other therapists on Instagram on how to do Instagram say something along the lines of, don't say anything about your personal life that you wouldn't tell a client in session. And that just does not work for me. I tried doing that for a while. And for me personally, I had to make some key decisions along the way of my creative path around how I was going to think about what I was doing. And what really helped me with that was, and this doesn't, I don't even recommend this for, for most therapists. I don't know if it would work for most therapists. It worked for me because I already had a full private practice. I wasn't trying to build a private practice. But the decision that I had to make was that I don't solicit clients from my Instagram account. I'm a public facing therapist, but I'm not trying to be your therapist on my account.
Mm,
And that is the difference. And for me, that gives me a kind of ethical permission to talk about my personal life in a way that I would never with my clients. I would never talk to my clients about my dating life. I'm a psychoanalytic psychotherapist. I don't know that that's obvious on my page because I don't really talk about my work very often on my page. I
mhm,
talk about, well, I almost these days never talk about therapy, but I love talking about therapy and
mhm,
maybe I would want to talk more about it. But I don't talk to my clients about my personal life. They don't know if I'm married. They don't know if I'm a mother. Sometimes it will come up and I will disclose things person by person, but I'm very thoughtful about whether I do that or not. So to be as open on my page as I am required me to think of it like, listen, my friends know I'm a therapist, but I'm not their therapist. I'm thinking of my platform as a kind of parasocial relationship that's based on a type of friendship, that's based on a
mhm,
type of vulnerable sharing and connection that's not therapy. It's just not therapy. And I'm not trying to find clients on my page, which cost me something, I think, in terms of marketing
mhm,
of my creative path around how I was going to think about what I was doing. And what really helped me with that was, and this doesn't, I don't even recommend this for most therapists. I don't know if it would work for most therapists. It worked for me because I already had a full private practice. I wasn't trying to build a private practice. But the decision that I had to make was that I don't solicit clients from my Instagram account. I'm a public facing therapist, but I'm not trying to be your therapist on my account.
mm,
And that is the difference. And for me, that gives me a kind of ethical permission to talk about my personal life in a way that I would never with my clients. I would never talk to my clients about my dating life. I'm a psychoanalytic psychotherapist. I don't know that that's obvious on my page because I don't really talk about my work very often on my page. I
Mhm.
talk about well, I almost these days never talk about therapy, but I love talking about therapy. And
Mhm.
maybe I would want to talk more about it. But I don't talk to my clients about my personal life. They don't know if I'm married. They don't know if I'm a mother. Sometimes it will come up and I will disclose things person by person, but I'm very thoughtful about whether I do that or not. So to be as open on my page as I am required me to think of it like, listen, my friends know I'm a therapist, but I'm not their therapist. I'm thinking of my platform as a kind of parasocial relationship that's based on a type of friendship, that's based on a
Mhm.
type of vulnerable sharing and connection that's not therapy. It's just not therapy. And I'm not trying to find clients on my page, which cost me something, I think, in terms of marketing.
Mhm.
And that's maybe not what everyone would decide to do, but that gave me the creative freedom that I wanted, where I could say whatever I wanted and not worry about it. So that's how I got there.
Absolute. Oh man, you just spoke to something that resonated so deeply. I just recently have made the shift from, well, back up a little bit. So I originally was posting as like my private practice name, like my business name, and
Yeah.
that felt like a lot of pressure to
Yes.
embody like this business, like this entity. It didn't give me a lot of flexibility. And so on a whim, I rebranded just about everything, my website, the name, all of it. I still express that I'm accepting new clients and what it's like to work with me, but I do not sell
Hmm.
therapy on social media. Like you can work with me, you can find me, but it is not
Yes.
the driving factor of my content. And so I love that you just put into words something that I have recently been thinking about. It's no, I'm not constantly like driving the market of like, hey, I'm accepting new clients and
Yes.
and getting through the algorithm, but you discuss like the creative risk and the creative flexibility that it's giving you to show up as a therapist who is also online, who is also a person.
Yes. Yeah, I think I didn't know you had done a rebrand. I'm so interested in that. I'm gonna have to go do a deep dive, and I'd actually be interested to hear more about that. But yeah, I think again, it's the difference for me, it's the difference between showing and telling. I felt like before I was telling people how to live, and that just didn't really feel that great to me. I don't do that in my sessions. I don't
Mhm.
sit with a client and say, I'm not a skills-based therapist. I don't sit with people and say, here are 5 ways to manage anxiety, or, let's look at the 5 clues that you might have childhood trauma. I mean, that's what we're talking about, but not in that way. And so rather than telling people how to heal, which I don't do in my private practice anyway, I just decided to show people what it's like to live as you heal, which
Mhm.
is what I'm personally doing, and I don't know if I really very clearly articulated this already, but my my creative expression on Instagram and hopefully in the future, like, I'm a writer. I want to write books. I don't know where else that would take me, but writing is kind of my first language,
Mhm.
which is so deeply creative. And my creative muscle and the channel that creativity flows through was blocked by my own trauma. I could not. I could do it privately. I could sit and write chapters of a book. I have 2 half-written books, but I couldn't put my work out. I was frozen around putting my work out. And it was my own therapeutic healing that made that possible. And so when I'm showing up on Instagram and expressing myself, it's an expression. It's me showing my own healing and what's possible in the work that we do with our clients. It's all intermingled.
Mhm.
But I'm like you, I'm available. I link to my website. People can find me. I do get inquiries, but it just had never felt right to me to be like crying over a breakup and then be like, and if you want to work with me, here's my contact. It just felt like I was like sort of exploiting my own feelings if I did that or myself, my inner child. I don't know.
What would you say is the moment or the words that you heard What would you say really gave you that permission to say, forget all the noise, forget what this could say about me or mean about me if I show up? What was
Yeah.
the moment where you were just like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to keep showing up and I'm going to see what this journey is like?
I think I'm not sure that there was one moment, but I think when I discovered IFS and internal family systems,
Mhm.
which I'm assuming your is part of your work because of the name of your podcast.
I do dabble in it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I just assumed you're familiar with it. But yeah, so IFS, where you're sort of working with your inner child parts, the idea that we have all have not just an inner child, but many inner children that
Mhm.
take over and run things without us even really knowing. I heard Richard Schwartz, who's the inventor of IFS, on a podcast with Glennon Doyle. I was listening to her podcast and he came on and he guided her through an IFS session. And I did it with her. So he was like telling her to do things, and I was just sitting there in my car. I
Mhm.
had just parked in my driveway and I sat there in my car and I followed his instructions and I started sobbing almost immediately. That's how I know that I'm in an IFS meditation that's working, is if I just immediately start sobbing, because that's kind of, yeah, that's my clue. It's not, it doesn't work that way for everybody, but I was in my driveway sobbing. I had kind of contacted a particular part inside that was related, I can't remember now what it was related to, self-criticism or perfectionism, something like that. It just felt so visceral that there was this part inside of me that was very wounded and acting out in ways that were young and scared and control seeking. And I started doing regular guided IFS meditations. I was not doing it in my own therapy. I would take the intel to my therapist and be like, I did this meditation, I discovered this part, and then I would tell her all about it. But she's not an IFS. I'm in psychoanalytic psychotherapy. So I go to therapy 3 days a week. I've been seeing my therapist for 7 years or 8 years, like that. Something I go to so much therapy, but we're doing a different kind of work together. So this was something I started doing by myself, and I started taking into her and being like, this is changing my life. And she was very supportive of it. And that just cleared the way.
Mhm.
Whatever kind of block I had or wall that would come up around my fears about being judged, my
Mhm.
fears about looking stupid, my fears about being new at something and not knowing what I was doing. Because social media, for unless you're someone who grew up doing it and it's your like nature.
Mhm.
For me, it was not my first nature. I had to figure out how to do it. I had to get comfortable talking on camera and
Mhm.
writing hooks and being seen. There's so much about letting people see you and in a public facing way. And I think just I had a lot of shame around what it would feel like to be seen.
Mhm.
And it was really those IFS meditations that changed everything for me. And I have a natural creative instinct and I also have a natural ambition. I'm very competitive, I guess is one way to put it, but not in a mean-spirited way, just like I feel powerful and I kind of want to show it off. Like, look what I can do. Kind of the way a
Mhm.
kid is at a playground, like,
Mhm.
watch me, watch me. I'm going to do something cool. And so, but I was very inhibited by these other aspects of my personality that would come in and check those other parts of me and be like, you're not allowed to act that way. You're not allowed to do that. So I needed to get that out of the way. And I really needed to get, especially coming from the world of psychoanalysis, I really needed to get the idea that I'm supposed to be a blank slate. That's old school psychoanalysis. That's not contemporary psychoanalysis anyway.
Mhm.
But I had something in me of like, all of the people that I most respect in this work are going to think that what I'm doing is unethical. And that was a real hurdle for me. And I had to kind of find a way to not care, which happened through IFS work.
Yeah. IFS really makes healing feel so digestible because
Yes.
it's not the whole person. It is this one part of
Hmm.
us that we are working to tap into, that we are working with. And it is typically a younger part that was
Hmm.
criticized, that was maybe shunned or minimized if they tried to be expressive or emotional. And being able to address it from a part versus the entire person,
Yes.
it makes it feel much more doable. Because if we're
Hmm.
trying to correct all of who we are, that just feels like a chore sometimes, at least for me, when I think about my own healing
Absolutely,
journey.
absolutely. And more than a chore too, it's sort of in my work as a therapist, I've been in private practice for 10 years or so. Very hard actually to get traction with. There are many ways of thinking about this, but one way of thinking about it is like when I'm working with a client and I'm thinking of them holistically and I'm trying to find movement in the direction
Mhm.
that feels healthier. Anytime you start to get that movement, a part will step in and push back. It's like, this doesn't feel safe, or this isn't. The way that I think about it is like a part stepping in and being like, hey, I'm not healed yet. I
Mhm.
actually need care. Like, I can't allow this healing to happen until you pay attention to me over here.
Yeah.
And so the feeling of like taking one step forward and one step back in the clinical work when you're approaching things too broadly, I think tremendous work can be done. Again, I think there are many ways to think about this, but in my own healing journey, I just have found that it's a system.
Hmm.
And if you only, if you neglect parts of the system in the healing work, like it just doesn't, it won't go in the direction that you want it to. It won't actually move. And yeah, it can feel overwhelming. It can feel discouraging. I agree. It just doesn't feel as doable.
Hmm. We both know that the therapy community can be really small sometimes,
Uh,
and everyone knows everybody. And so I would love to talk more about that fear around being judged by your
yeah.
counterparts within psychoanalytic. And for folks who don't know, like classical psychoanalysis is blank slate. Like you are not reflecting much back to the person. Most of it is a projection onto the therapist. The therapist is a vessel. And please correct me, that was a very quick explanation of classic psychoanalysis. But what has it been like to interact with your peers as you have been navigating this content journey?
I actually think psychoanalysis really has, or psychoanalytic ways of thinking have actually really helped me with it. One thing I would add to your, well, actually a couple things I would add to your definition of psychoanalysis. The blank slate idea, I think in some ways comes from, like 100 years ago in Freud.
Hmm.
But in some ways, I don't know. There's a lot to say about that we don't have time to get into. I think it's a misunderstanding of what even psychoanalysis used to be.
Hmm.
But nowadays, like the two things I would emphasize are a relational aspect of things, like really understanding what's happening in the relationship,
Hmm.
which is not so much about project. I mean, projection is can absolutely happen. Countertransference or transference is real, right? Like what people transfer
Hmm.
relationally and emotionally into the work with us and into the relationship with us is such a huge part of how psychoanalysts work, or how I, let me just say how I work, right? Like
Hmm.
thinking about what is happening interpersonally and what that means. Uh, And then the other piece I would add is just an understanding of the unconscious. I just don't know that we talk enough about the unconscious in other modalities, like talking about CBT or
Hmm.
DBT or um, IFS is a lot about the unconscious, which is why I really like it. Although we don't really use that language, I think, when we talk about IFS. Like I don't hear a lot of people talking about the unconscious, which I don't know, that's just kind of bothers me. Yeah, so how has it helped me? So when I feel feelings of fear about being judged, or yeah, it comes down to fear of judgment, it helps me to have a kind of framework, psychological framework of understanding, like meaning I can imagine that perhaps if I'm being judged by other therapists, that they might be feeling jealous of me, you know, that like that's not always true. I'm not saying everyone who has judgments with me is jealous, but that they have their own feelings and psychological realities. Some of those are conscious, some of those are not, that I'm not responsible for. And I don't have to take them on. And I think in my own, jealousy is just one part of it. I think fear, right?
Hmm.
Or what's another way of thinking about it? My own unconscious projections. Like I do think I project judgment where it doesn't exist.
Hmm.
I think that there are probably a lot of therapists in my community who really are curious about what I'm doing, who are really supportive of what I'm doing. Maybe they wouldn't choose personally to do it,
Hmm.
but who genuinely don't have judgments about it. And I'm imagining that they're judging me because of my own unconscious stuff coming up, right?
Hmm.
So reminding myself that people have all kinds of feelings for all kinds of reasons. And it's not always about me. And I don't need to make it about me.
When I decided to grow beyond the therapy room, I knew I needed systems that could keep up. Enter Jane App, the practice management platform that has my back. From online booking to charting to payments, Jane keeps everything streamlined so I can show up for my clients and create content, build my brand, and run my business with confidence. If you're ready to level up your practice, head to jane.app and use code JAZZ1MO for a 1 month grace period. Mm-hmm.
I have my own stuff that is my work to do. That's not the responsibility of other people. They are free to judge me. Like that was a big part of it, is being like, they have every right to judge me. They can do,
Mm-hmm.
people can feel how they want to feel. Like, I think that there are some real concern. There are some, I find myself judging other therapists sometimes. That's a real feeling, right? And maybe not one I'm always proud of, but I do feel that. And sometimes for good reason. Like there are therapists doing stuff on Instagram that I think is unethical. And they might disagree with me, right? We all can make our own choices as long as we're not crossing any like safety lines or really causing harm. That's fine. So I've just had to kind of make peace with like people carry all kinds of feelings inside. I carry feelings, other people carry feelings. I've developed relationships with therapists that are very supportive of me. And my own therapist is very supportive of me, which has been pretty healing because she's very old school psychoanalysis. She's a psychoanalyst, and I don't think she would have started off endorsing being a public figure on social media, but we've just talked about it so much and, talk about a healing relationship. I never feel judged by her. Yeah. So that's been really helpful.
Yeah, it's a testament to, I think, growth. It's a journey where we can meet people and be in relationship with people that can meet us where we are, and
Yeah.
giving ourselves permission to not shrink ourselves or mold ourselves into the comfort box, but allow ourselves to be curious about what this nudge is telling us and following that, and then
Mm.
meeting people who can support us in that.
Yeah. You mentioned that you went through a similar journey. I'm curious if you have also had to navigate or have gone through a process around, I don't know, the kind of social aspect of being a therapist in the presence of other therapists, because
Mhm.
our work is so, in some ways, so secluded. It's like we're there in a session with our client. We're not being observed by other therapists when we're working,
Mhm.
unless we're just in early training or something, and we have a supervisor who needs to record our work or something. But other than that, like I've worked in isolation my whole career. And then all of a sudden we're in this public space with other therapists. I'm just curious if that's come up for you or like how you've navigated it.
Yeah, I've definitely experienced it more at like in-person networking events.
Oh,
Like,
interesting.
I'll give my business card, I say you can find me on social media, and I'll get a lot of responses
Uh,
like, "Oh, I don't dabble in that," or something of that nature. And I'm like, okay, cool. My supervisor that I work with is very, very supportive. She has her own content page too. And
uh,
so it's nice to have someone that is not only in the space to some degree, but is very supportive and actually encourages me to pursue the space to the fullest, however I imagine it, which is very healing. Even like friends, I think that has been a fluctuating journey, as like people who we started in our therapy careers together. Again, when you talk about some of that unconscious, maybe like something that's stirring up for you as the way you
uh-huh.
see it, it our relationships have certainly changed and evolved,
Mm,
and I'm still navigating like what that looks like. What is the extent of expecting support or even mentioning it,
mhm,
or even like popping a congratulations on something.
mm,
And so that
mm,
is its own journey that I continue to sit in. And I remind myself, especially for my own healing, that I have not met all of the people that are going to love me. And so if
mm,
I force or hope or anticipate that the people that I know now will come around or show up differently, that puts
Mm-hmm.
me in a pretty bad space. And so
Mm-hmm.
trusting that I'm not met everybody and that there are people who are cheering me on, rooting for me, who maybe haven't even said anything allows me to heal that
Mm-hmm.
fear of rejection, abandonment wound a little bit and
Mm-hmm.
allow myself to keep showing up. I feel like I could talk to you all morning about so much. I feel like there's so many parallels within our journey. What do you imagine for yourself within the content space as we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of all I've thought about for the last year. Talk about like the ambitious, kind of the ambition.
Mhm.
Like there's something that got unlocked in social media that I didn't really, a muscle that I didn't get to use as much. Once I had a private practice, it was like I was already full. I didn't really know how to grow. So when I got to social media, all of a sudden it was like all of my ambition and all of my creative impulses to like make something, not just to make content, but to make a business and to kind of make a platform really started kind of firing on all cylinders. So, I mean, I feel like in some ways what I would want for my future, it doesn't feel like there's a real clear mold for it.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily want to be like a public facing famous therapist who like has a podcast and like talks about how to raise healthy kids. Like that's not my goal. I don't want to talk to people in that way.
Mhm.
I just want to be a storyteller, really. And so I've circled like, how does that work as a business? Like, how do you
Mhm.
turn that into a business? My best idea is that I think of my page as a living memoir. So I think of my account as a document, as a type of memoir. And the longer term goal would be to actually write a memoir. I have two half written ones already, one about my childhood and one about my dating life.
Mhm.
And so the hope would be at some point to take the leap in that direction and basically to have public conversations about what it means to be human. I mean, that's all I really want to do, and to find a way to get paid doing that, to talk to people about their experiences, which is very hard to do when you're running a page. I mean, I can't in my comments to someone be like, tell me about your childhood. But in spaces like this, right, when I'm having more conversations here or, I don't know where else that might be possible, but thinking about ways to have deeper conversations publicly about what it's like to suffer. I mean, that's my passion, is to think about that, and to connect with people. Um, I think the thing that relieves suffering is human connection. I don't necessarily think it's about developing capacities. I mean, that is a part of it. I don't mean to minimize that, but
Mhm.
um, skill building or developing capacities. For me, it's really just about being with people and trying to make that something that is scalable.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who is trying to explore what content creation looks like for them?
Okay, so I think that content creation is spiritual work. One thing that I always tell my groups is one of the biggest effects of trauma is that it disconnects us from our
Mhm.
wholeness. That there's there's a space inside of all of us that is completely whole and good and worthy, no matter, I always say, no matter what has been done to us, right, throughout our lives, and also no matter what we have done. Because I work
Mhm.
with people, I think, who sometimes who either are offenders or carry a lot of shame about decisions that they've made. So I always tell people, you are whole and good no matter what has been done to you or what you have done. Trauma disconnects us from that place inside. And I deeply believe, I can't prove it, but I really believe that creativity flows from that place of wholeness,
Mhm.
that the creative impulse comes from that place inside, our deep goodness. It comes from the universe and it channels
Mhm.
through. It's like a portal. The universe wants to create through every one of us and create something unique and beautiful through each and every one of us. And so anytime we're engaged in a creative act, whether it's content creation or cooking or gardening, whatever, it's inherently healing because in order to create, we have to be connected to the whole place inside.
Mhm.
And so what I would say to anybody who wants to get into content creation is to think of it as a spiritual practice, to think of it as a way of connecting to your own goodness and to trusting that you don't have to muscle your way there and you don't have to muscle your way through it. The universe wants to express itself through what you have to say. And if you can find a way to trust that process and to trust your own instincts around what you want to make, what you want to say, and how you want to do it, if you can just get out of your own way and connect to something, the kind of creative spark inside, that is what I think people respond to. That is
Mhm.
what people want so deeply and crave is to see people and engage with creators who are willing to risk being seen in an honest place. And, I guess it's not very practical advice. It's like, just try, just be willing to bear the cringe
Mhm.
of taking some creative risks, and just know that it takes time for that to kind of start to get to know how to package that in a way that's digestible for other people. But
Mhm.
you'll get there. I mean, I leave my early content up on purpose. You can see the very first post I made on my page. And sometimes I think, oh, I should take that down now that I have the followers that I have. Like, oh, it's embarrassing that those first posts are still up. One of the things that really helped support me in my early journey was going to people who had huge platforms, who had more than 100,000 followers, and scrolling all the way back to their beginning. I would go all the way through to see, okay, how did this person start? How many likes did they had? They had 4 likes, and they
Mhm.
had 4 likes for like months and months and months. And I use that to fuel my own, to combat my own shame. And so I leave that stuff up on my May page in the hope that people can go and see it and see, like, I
Mhm.
have almost 250,000 followers now. I had 5 followers at one point, and it was my willingness to repeat and repeat and repeat and try and practice and practice and practice that built over time. So the courage and the willingness to just try, and the trust that you're in partnership with something much bigger than you that wants to be seen, if you'll just trust the process.
Mhm. And I want to even add to that the courage to continue showing up even when no one's watching.
Yes,
Even when you're not getting
absolutely.
the clicks, even when you're not getting the comments, the emails aren't flooding through, having such a deep commitment to the larger purpose gets to be your driving force to showing up online.
Yeah, exactly. If you believe that you're there for a purpose, and that you're trying, that you, not so much like in an ego way that you have something to offer people,
Mhm.
but more like that you're coming from a spirit of service and trusting that there are people who need to hear what you have to say. Yeah, I just think that you can't go wrong if you keep going with that.
No. I also started mine at 0, and my first couple of posts aren't even me. They're like about my journey with plants.
How special though.
Yeah, because I wasn't a plant person. And so I was reflecting on like having these plants and I was talking about growth. And I was so disappointed when one of my plants died and what I was doing to revive it. And that allowed
Mm.
me the space to really process like much larger concepts that
Yeah,
now
it's
I
a
get
metaphor.
to elaborate on in my content. But I think so many people can just resonate with so much of what you shared about taking risks, stepping out
Mhm,
on faith, on a hope, on
mhm.
the idea that there's something bigger and more out there if we allow ourselves to step out of our comfort zone. And so I'm really excited for people to hear this episode.
Oh, good. Oh, if I can be helpful to one person, that's always my goal. I guess I just wanted to say thank you for inviting me. This is my first podcast. I was really excited to come here. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much for, I guess, I feel really seen in the invite, right? That there's something about my page that communicates, I guess, like that, like you would want to talk to me and have a
Mhm.
conversation with me. I'm really touched and honored by that. So thank you so much for having me, Jasmine.
Well, I'm honored to be your first. And as a closing question to all of my guests, I am asking, what is your commitment to yourself for 2025?
Oh, for 2025, I guess, which we're in the middle of now.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, 2025 to me feels like the year that everything in my life changes. I mean, at the beginning of the year, I had 2,000 followers and I have 243,000 now. So, like, yeah, it happens so fast and so wildly. It feels like the year where things are happening that I didn't even dream were possible. And I'm holding space for that in other ways. My page is a lot about dating. I'm single. I really struggle with that as a 42-year-old woman who wants a family. It's a deep source of grief and sadness in my life. And the change that has happened in my professional life in 2025 makes it feel to me like anything is possible.
Mhm.
And the healing work that I did around shame and perfectionism, if that is possible for me professionally, I'm really holding space for what is possible for me personally in terms of the work that could happen, or maybe even already has happened. I would argue has already happened inside of me that
Yeah.
is making space for the right partner to come into my life. So that is how I'm thinking about 2025 as a kind of dogged commitment to waiting
Mm.
in faith for the full life of my dreams and knowing that it's possible because I've witnessed what's possible already.
I am so excited to continue to follow your journey and see what you do. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.